other questions for each other?
I have a question for Zoe. I mean, you said that the I-95 photographs, they had their life, they had their venue, and then you created this book. Is that a book of the images only from that show or that installation?
Yeah.
All right. So what's your relationship between to the photographs that were in the installation and the photographs that you put in the book? How did you approach the photographic idea within these two different venues?
The book, I saw the book as a completed piece, as a piece unto itself, and then I saw that piece as a tool to figure out the installation, as a way to help move the photographs about and think about the different order and the different syntax and the movement that one could have in the installation while still having the book being autonomous. So the book is constructed very much, it's specific, and it's ordered in a way that the installation is, in some ways, intended to be read like a palindrome. So you can read it from front to back and get the same themes and concepts with a fairly strong center that allows you to kind of flip back and forth. And that's something I worked on it for the installation. And the images in the book, some of them didn't make it into the installation. Some of them I'd thought about in terms of 95, and then they came in after seeing the way they could be juxtaposed with others. But it was just the book, even though it's its own thing, it was just one part of trying to figure out that final installation.
In terms of experiencing the photographs, how do you think these two venues change or don't change that experience?
I think that the book, in a way, is more, it's a guidebook to the concept of the installation. And that's very different than the idea of a photo book. So even though it's intended to be seen, again, as its own autonomous piece, I feel that it was complementary, but it's not wholly representative of it. It was a tool.
Thanks.
Thanks for asking.
Yeah.
Actually, Michael, I have a question for you.
Yes.
No, I'm just curious, because this is something that I grapple with, and I think we grapple with at the Met. You were talking about those are great installation shots. I love those. Berenice Abbott mounting things on Masonite, some photographers putting them directly on the wall years ago. Is one of your goals to reproduce that kind of installation, or do you take works that were installed that way, 50 years ago, and give them a new look? How do you address those questions?
Ask me again.
Well, it's something that we grapple with at the Met as well. Like, there was a period where those plexi boxes were very popular.
Oh, and so if the work gets shown at later dates, how to recreate that.
And the plexi boxes usually get pretty beat up, but they're also kind of hideous in a way. But that's my view now. So should one exhibit the work that was exhibited in the plexi box, maybe in a new plexi box, or?
I think trying to think of the instance. There was a time when I worked in a gallery where those plexi boxes were very popular, and in fact it was a Diane Arbus show, and there was and I think I'm correct in saying this, but Arbus produced the box of 10, which were 10 choice photographs in addition, and I believe the original box was a plexi box. And so when we showed that work, we created plexi boxes that kind of mimicked that, because that was a way that was in style and in vogue at the time to do that. I'm a gallerist, and there's unfortunately certain limitations that I have. But I would say that, if there's an authenticity to the work, the way it was installed, and not merely, listen, a lot of work in the 70s and even the 80s was, artists used Nielsen black metal frames because that was basic. Now, just using those frames today, is that a sign of authenticity? I don't think so much. I think it was just the material that was common and used then. But I do think if at any one time an artist used specific materials to convey certain messages, then yes, if possible, to reproduce it the same way, for sure. As long as it wasn't just a utilitarian use of material.
You know, that they used because they
Okay.
couldn't afford something better.
Although, isn't that,
But how do we
Part
know
of it,
that
too?
if they're not around?
you know, I mean, Francesca Woodman, she was using rubber cement, white glue, masking tape. Apparently she loved duct tape,
Hmm.
you know? Don't we all, right? Exactly. But she was using those because they were there and because it was practical. You know, I don't know if she were alive and had $1 million, I don't know how she'd be.
If she would do that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know. But it's part of the piece now, it's part of that aesthetic.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah, it's part of the
become-
history. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, shall we open up? Yeah, Mitch.
You first. Well,
Sure,
I-
I think the question is about framing and more traditional presentation, mounting and framing, and if the person who acquires the object, whether it's an institution or a private collector, wants it to be framed and presented differently than the artist does, is that legitimate, and what are the... Or the gallery.
Right, yeah.
I mean, maybe, I do remember at one point, oh no, now I'm going to forget the artist's name. Shoot, that's bad. Anyway, this artist, who will remain unnamed, who was doing really wonderful black and white photographs, covering them with varnish, and then pinning them up to boards, you know, wood. And they were great. And, you know, the wood also had the texture to it, and they used the same varnish on the wood. If anyone thinks of the name of the artist, you can say it. And then some years later, I saw the work in a gallery, and it was off the boards, and it was on a white background, and it was in a frame, and it was all prettified. And
Yeah.
it just,
That's terrible. Yeah.
you know, and I actually had talked to the gallery owner and said, what happened here? And you know, he kind of admitted, he said, well, there might have been a little suggestion that, you know, and I mean, in his defense, the artist conceded. The artist said, sure, okay, let's do it that way. But I felt there was something about the freshness that was missing in that. But you can argue both ways. You can say, well, the artist probably sold more work, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's a certain, I think, authenticity to materials sometimes that the artist wants to use. I work with several artists that I get the work framed because that's the way they want to show it, period. Now, if someone acquires the work, whether it's and they're archivally sound, I'm not talking about framed in a way that's wacky, but they're archivally sound. But if a collector or museum, especially a collector, chooses to reframe it in black instead of white, that's their prerogative. But I will tell them that this is the artist's intention. And a lot of times, even if the artist does, like I have an artist in Germany, for instance, and a lot of times the work, let's face it, it's not easier to get here rolled in a tube than it is framed in glass. And he also likes glass. And I'm like, glass? Why are you framing in glass? He goes, because it's classic. I'm like, okay. But if I get a print in, I will tell the collector exactly, in fact, I'll have an image of how we frame the work normally, how the artist would like to frame the work. But I'm basically giving them a rolled print. And they ultimately will do what they want to do. I would say 99 out of 100 times they will frame it the same way or a very similar way to the artist. But not every time.